Everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversations in the Future of Work. I am your host, Rachel Cossar, and I am really excited to welcome one of our budding partners onto the show from the Regis Company. So, Mike Vaughan, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Good to be here.
Wonderful to have you. Would you mind sharing a little bit with our audience? What you're focused on these days? What's exciting you about the future of work?
Oh, sure. So I serve two roles. One is the chief editor of The Thinking Effects, and The Thinking Effect is a website that is dedicated to helping learning and development professionals learn about AI to help advance their career, to help them understand how they can help their own organization. So I've been doing that for a couple of years. That's a really exciting platform because it gives me an opportunity to really connect with people and in the L&D community. And another role that I serve is the chief or the CEO of the Regis Company. Now, the Regis Company, we produced what is called the very first skills practice platform. And so this is kind of where we think the future of learning is going, really focused on that skills development and being able to not only develop skills, but be able to validate those skills. And so that's where we think a lot of the future learning is going.
Absolutely. And we'll get into actually a number of those points you just mentioned. The first one, actually going back to your thought leadership, I took a look at some of the articles and content that you've gotten out there, and it's really interesting. You spend a lot of time focusing on reshaping, rewiring mental models. So can you share more about either research you've found or done in this space?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Maybe a little context. So I actually started kind of in the AI development world, and then that got me really interested in the brain. And so went into cognitive science and then ultimately into neuroscience. And my research there was all really focused around this area called mental models. And so thinking about a mental model is really how do we approach decisions? How do we interact? How do we solve problems? So these mental models kind of define that. And so what got me really excited was trying to figure out ways that would allow people to surface flawed mental models and then explore developing new types of mental models. And that's what led me into the simulation space. So being able to put people into a simulation where they can practice skills. And as they're doing so, become aware that, boy, the way I was looking at that, or my perspective was a little bit flawed here or dated, or maybe there's a more efficient way of doing something. So how do I do that? And then in the simulation, you explore new ways. And so that's what we mean kind of by that mental model research. And it's done a number of different studies using technology to see how to change mental models.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So let's say you want to have your team really understand project management. You got a new team, you're launching a new project, and you're got some new team that is kind of forming and so forth. Well, what we've seen is a team that actually has some overlap in their mental models performs more highly. They're better performance. But you don't want complete overlap because then you have groupthink. And so what you're really looking for is diversity in thought, but with some areas of overlap. And so now imagine putting that team together into an experience where they're surfacing their strengths and each other's becoming aware of those. But at the same time, they're developing a common language, a common vision, a common mission on how they want to run those projects, communicate, and so forth. And in doing that, we found that overall team performance goes up because of that overlaps in mental models.
Right. Interesting. I also really, I think that there, and we have a, actually, the next question is about this. So let me actually skip over to it, because I think what you just mentioned about the simulations and giving people an opportunity to actually practice something beyond being exposed to a concept is where a lot of trainings have historically fallen short, right? And so I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on where you think corporate training to date does fall flat, and if you can dive a little bit deeper into this concept you've mentioned a few times of skills validation.
Sure. Yeah, one of the things, the underlying research behind the website, The Thinking Effect, was this whole notion about a lot of training for the last 20 years has been really focused on teaching people what to think.
Yeah.
And what we really need to be doing in learning is educating people on how to think. So, how to adapt their thoughts, their behaviors to new and emerging situations more quickly, more effectively. And so, what we're seeing is kind of where training falls flat is people continue to really focus on that what to think, that foundational knowledge. Now, that's important. So, don't get me wrong. We all need that foundational knowledge because without it, it's really hard to go practice and apply that.
Mm.
And so, but what we're really finding is that AI is doing an amazing job at providing more of that foundational knowledge. And so then that really begs the question is like, okay, where's the puck going? What is that future? And so what we've been thinking a lot about is the convergence of skill development and skill validation. So we're seeing a kind of a convergence where the L&D department is starting to merge underneath talent. So they're kind of coming together. So now you have your HR systems that have been really focused on talent identification
Yeah.
and being able to help identify the right people for the right job at the right time type of thing. Now with L&D underneath them, well, you still have that learning development aspect, but now with skills validation, it's actually providing not only that individual with greater insight into their gaps and how well they can apply a skill under certain situations, but it's also feeding those HR systems to give them a richer data set to help, identify the right people. So that's where we see it. Skill development combined with skill validation is where we see a lot of the future of L&D.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. And at Virtual Sapiens, obviously, we share a lot of the same values. But I think what you said about, because I think that there's a lot of understandable fear when it comes to applications of AI and the general atrophy of the way people are using their minds and thinking, right? Because it
Mhm.
can be pretty astounding to use AI for certain specific tasks and realize that you've just kind of skipped ahead in terms of a lot of the thinking that would have been required to produce that same document or piece of
Mhm.
information or proposal or like whatever it may
Right.
be,
Yeah.
right? And so I think platforms like the ones that you've developed at the Regis company and the one we have at Virtual Sapiens are really interesting because the AI is very much in support of the
Mhm.
development of these thinking, reasoning skills.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that higher cognitive skills. That's right. I think that's what makes our platform so unique is that they're not targeting that knowledge level consumption learning. It's really targeting really that how to think and practicing it and adapting your thinking and developing that decision making, problem solving, collaboration, those higher order thinking skills.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Which is I think it's just going to become more and more important, right? Like the opportunity to have AI not provide you with the answer, but help you reflect
Mhm.
and reason towards the answer you feel is most appropriate depending on the context, right? And I think that it's really imperative to have more platforms that can help professionals develop those skills.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And that's what I've always loved about Virtual Sapiens. It does that very thing where it
Mhm.
doesn't just give you an answer, it gives you a chance to discover it and come to that self awareness. One of the things we found with our mental model research that if you're going to change a mental model, uh, you need to get to that cognitive dissonance so that, triggering, we
Mhm.
call it the anterior cingulate cortex, which is your error detection, and then you need to be able to have that aha effect, that
Right.
moment of insight, and then you need to be able to practice it. And that's what I've always thought your product does a fantastic job around.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we like it's funny because we call I don't know, it's not it's like a little bit less of a scientific word, but I think it gets to the same principle as like blind spots, right? These
Mhm.
blind spots, right? So we focus a lot on those behavioral blind spots that we might not realize are really getting in the way of the message we're sending or the connection we're trying to establish, right? And then on the other side, there are those blind spots in terms of the way we're thinking, the mental model, the way we're thinking about something, and how it might not be as reflective of reality or whatever it is that we're
Oh,
considering.
I love that. Oh, I love that language. Actually, that's a great one. My wife was asking me this weekend, let's talk about our blind spots. And I was like, their blind spot. So how do I know which ones to
I know,
actually
right?
have? So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that, like as you said, the aha moment
Uh-huh.
is what facilitators are always looking for in workshops, right? We're always
Right.
like looking, like if we can get someone to have an aha moment, it's basically it's all the same thing. It's all the finding that dissonance between our perception to date and then this new finding that has either been surfaced during an experiential workshop, human led, that's great, or has been surfaced by a platform that is like AI enabled and AI powered.
Yeah. Yeah. Fully agree. I love that. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
great language.
that's
Mhm.
awesome. What trends are you seeing in corporate training and specifically in terms of, well, yes, budget, because that's on everyone's minds these days, but
Sure.
also in terms of, are you finding that companies are really leaning into some of these AI powered tools to help programming? Like where's is there a balance between
Sure.
in person and platform based? Like, yeah, I'm just curious to hear what you're seeing.
Yeah. So on the first part of that, we are seeing L&D and talent. I mentioned this earlier, coming together.
Mhm. Yeah.
We're seeing the CLO role change. That CLO title doesn't seem to be kind of a top priority now. It's kind of merging into talent. So those jobs and job roles, I think, are going to be morphing here in the next couple of years. And then part of the budget, what we're seeing right now is everyone is flat. They're not getting any new dollars, and so what they're being asked to do is what can you do to produce high quality learning with the people you have. So I
Mhm.
think that is really for the next year. Being part of the thinking effect and with AI as my background, I do feel like that is going to start changing in a year, where it's going to be do more with less message.
Right.
And what that is going to basically mean is, hey, L&D team, we're going to, probably cut your budget. And so what value can you get from AI? How are you going to automate needs analysis? How are you going to automate design? How are you going to automate content creation and development? How are you going to cut subject matter expert time? How are you going to cut the overall L&D life cycle so you can respond to business needs faster with a higher quality experience? And so I think that's going to start to force the use of AI. I would say one of the things that we saw, especially early on when we launched the Thinking Effect, is for the first year or two, most of the media was talking about all the fear around AI. And so much so, I think people got really nervous to use AI, especially
Yeah.
in corporations.
Yeah.
And they were terrified, like, if I post something and it gets exposed, I'll lose my job. I think that's starting to shift. If I start looking at the media, even mainstream magazines, you're seeing the front cover. It's how do you partner with AI? How
Yeah.
do you get the value of AI? So I think that language change is going to make it easier for not only learning development professionals, but the organization to start to take advantage of the benefits of AI.
Right. Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's great to see that turning point. We've noticed also, and I'm sure you have too. The other thing that I think is really fascinating is that role in learning, whoever's leading the strategy around learning, is now like very close partners with IT or,
Mhm.
that data privacy and security role. And I think initially there was a lot of hesitation to face that because it can be so complex and it can really slow things down, but I see it as unavoidable,
Right. I do too. Yeah. I
right?
think we're going to see more convergence of IT, L&D, HR, these systems. Yeah.
Right, and so I always, because Virtual Sapiens has such a partnership approach, I always try to help the individual on our partner side who's having to, like, present this hybrid solution, right? Whether there is a human component involved, but definitely our technology is so AI enabled that, or so AI powered that, oftentimes there's this like hesitation to even begin the conversation, and it's like,
Uh,
well, but then on the flip side, like once you do go through that procurement vendor process approval, then it's actually your solution becomes quite sticky because there's been so
yeah.
much
Yeah.
investment to make
Just
it happen.
getting through that is the hard part. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. So, you've one of the things that's been really interesting in hearing more about your journey is the entrepreneurial components of it and how you've
Mm.
navigated across a number of different ecosystems and over the past year. So I'd be curious to hear more about, what are some of the big learnings as an entrepreneur that you've had?
Oh my goodness, that's a big question. All right. It's much harder than I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my God. Totally.
it's really hard. Uh, I think it sounds a little cliche, but clarity and purpose is the utmost importance. And the reason I say it sounds a little cliche is because I always thought I had clarity and purpose. I always felt I had purpose because I always wanted to create a learning experience that really made a difference in someone's life. So I've always had that clarity, or that, I guess, that North Star. But when you start to think about product and technology, it's like, what do you need to really create to do that? And getting clarity, because you start chasing too many different ideas and too many
Yeah.
potential paths. And that, I think, could be, it's absolutely detrimental to an entrepreneur, to a business. And so being crystal clear with what you do exceptionally well, in our North Star, making a difference in someone's life, is really been very helpful. And the second one is the people that I surround myself with, because it is so darn hard. You want
Mhm.
people that can pick you up, that is just going to love on you and help get you back on your feet. And then people that you really respect because they bring a challenging opinion, a different idea, yeah, but yet you can work together, collaborate on to refine it. And so I would say those are probably the two biggest lessons. I mean, you're an entrepreneur too. I'd love to hear your thought.
Yeah, no, it's so funny that I would agree with your first statement. I think I was having a conversation with another entrepreneur friend over the weekend, and I think in founding something, I feel like you have to have a little bit of naivete
Mm,
in
I,
order to do it, because otherwise, like, if you're going to look at things so realistically, and like you look at the numbers of success rate and you're like, well, like, realistically, logically, I shouldn't go for this, right?
right.
Like,
Yeah.
everything is against me in this. So you kind of have to go into it without knowing how hard it's going to be. And I
That's a
certainly
great
did.
point.
I
Yeah.
definitely did. Right? Like, you have this vision, you're like, this is going to be great. I'm the person to do it. And then you go for it. And then, yeah.
Then
And
you're
then,
humbled.
oh my God. And then
Yeah.
you have that, like, right. Like, do you remember the first, like, big barrier that you faced?
Oh goodness. The first big one. Trying to think. Let's see. I would say, well, there's so many of them. It's like
I
I'm trying
know.
to think. Gosh,
Every
everything
day.
like when I'm trying to figure out how to take something to market, how to get product market
Yeah.
fit.
Yeah.
You take a simple concept like product market fit, but it's not a simple concept. It's a journey, and it's a very complex journey. And so I was completely thinking, oh yeah, everyone's going to love what we're going to do, and then you put it out there, and it's like, whoa, they actually don't love it as much as I love it.
Yeah.
And so now what do I need to do? And
Yeah.
I think that's the challenges. I don't know if that was the biggest barrier, but
Right.
it's certainly a big challenge that have faced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
How
I
about
think
you? Do you remember your biggest barrier?
I do. I actually remember we had built a POC, sorry, not really a POC, an MVP. And right, because one of the things that one of the assumptions we had was that, the AI would be able to provide compelling feedback uh, in real time, like as you're on a Zoom call, right? Because initially
Right.
that's what we started with, was the in-call coach. And we had built this MVP and it was working really nicely. And we were like using it concurrently in browser with a Google Meet. And then I was using it concurrently with my, like, Zoom application on my Mac, right? Because I'm a Mac
Uh-huh.
user. So and it was working so well. And we were so excited. And then we actually, like, very early had our first client use the product and pay for it. And they're a PC shop.
Oh no. Yeah. So you realized. Yeah.
And so he was like, oh, I can't, like, if I have Virtual Sapiens running, I can't use my Zoom application, or vice versa. If I have Zoom using my camera, Virtual Sapiens can't access it. And we didn't know that on PCs, only one application can access your webcam. at the same time.
Same
So you
time.
need actually a virtual camera to split the stream and send it to both applications or provide both applications with access.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
And
yeah.
so I remember like being in bed, and this at this point I'd already like raised some money, you know? And so I was like,
Uh-huh.
wow, was this my journey? Like literally like 3 months. And then I'm going to just be like, actually, this is impossible and like give people their money back.
Oh, yeah.
Like so bad. But then,
Uh,
we like dug into it more. And of course, I had some great, at that point, this was before my co-founder had joined, but I had a wonderful early advisor on the technical side. And we figured out a way, again, we figured out the solution of the virtual
right.
camera
Which
as a
is also part of
workaround.
the fun of being an entrepreneur, right? That's what probably
Yeah.
keeps us going, is figuring
Yeah.
out how to work through all these problems and
Yeah.
challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because it's continued to be a bit of a barrier for that specific product.
Hmm.
But now we actually focus more on some of the practice, asynchronous practice opportunities that aren't really happening during a call, so we don't have to worry about multiple cameras needing access.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
Oh my
You got to
God. Yeah,
work
I'll never
all
like
around.
forget that.
Yeah,
It's like so stressful.
that is. Yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, uh, I you know I feel like we could keep going and talking about a number of different things, but is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Um, I think, from the thinking effect perspective, I would say this is the time to really learn these AI tools,
Yeah.
start experimenting. You need to figure out how they're going to save you time, how they can help you add more value, because I think that's going to be important to every individual. And then, from the Regis perspective, the thing that we're really trying to do is help people learn new skills faster, and so they can have confidence in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so, these are kind of two things that we're deeply passionate about, and, hope that others can, look into it as well. Yeah.
How the thinking effect, is that like what's the easiest way for people to follow that
Yeah,
work?
I would say the easiest way, hit the website, thethinkingeffect.com, is the easiest way to hit that. And then if you want to learn more about skill development, hit theregiscompany.com.
Awesome. Great. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing all your insights, across a broad range of subjects. And as always, thanks to our audience for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.